Hello everyone, this is Al Fadi. I'd like to welcome you back to this amazing series about the search for Muhammad or the quest for Muhammad. And today's title is telling. We intentionally title it, Rock Inscriptions Also Tell a Different Story. And that's exactly what we are going to focus on today in our search for the real Muhammad. With me here in studio is Dr. Jay Smith to unpack this. Dr. Jay, thank you so much.
No, it's good to be here. Thank you.
So, what do rock inscriptions tell us about Muhammad?
Well, very similar to what the coins tell us. Now, why are we surprised by that? Because, again, we're going back to the 7th century, looking for the evidence on the ground. Coins are great evidence because they aren't disintegrating, they don't deteriorate. Rock inscriptions are also equally good because they don't disintegrate, they don't deteriorate. They're made out of rock. Rock and metal, you can see, will last for centuries and centuries, and they're almost as good today as the day they, in case of the coins, minted, or in case of the rock inscriptions, in case the time when they were chiseled out by those who were creating the rock inscriptions.
Right.
When we look at the what was happening with the rock inscriptions, let's go ahead and let's look at the slides, and when you want to look at the map there, many of the rock inscriptions. But the rock inscriptions that we're finding were all up in the north. 30,000 of them have now been found. And it's fascinating. They surveyed in places like Arabia, the Negev, Transjordan, and Syria, with possibly another 70,000 more yet to do. So there's a whole lot yet to do. But they can't find rock inscriptions from the 7th century in Mecca and Medina. One would expect it to be Mecca and Medina if these were being written at the time Muhammad lived, because that's where the Hajj was, that's where all people would come down to Mecca to do come to the sanctuary, of course, so that's where they would do the 5 stages of the Hajj, but nothing is down that far south. All of them are, if they were down that far south, they would have also been written in this type of Arabic. Like we talked about this in another episode. The Sabaic Arabic, which has dots and vowels in it. And yet we know that none of these inscriptions have dots and vowels. There's just 16 consonantal letters. And those 16 consonantal letters all come from up here. Where is the red rectangle, the small one at the top, north? That is today parts of Israel, parts of Syria, and parts of Jordan. In fact, it's fascinating because this Nabatean Aramaic comes from Petra. Petra. Why have we heard about Petra before? Gibson's material, Gibson's research.
Qibla, yeah.
The Qiblas are all facing. So the very same place where all this Arabic that we see in the rock inscription, which is also in the Quran, also is this Nabatean Aramaic, is all from the same place that the Qiblas are all facing. Can you see how this all fits together?
Right.
And that's why you need to look and see everything that Gibson was talking about from 1979 up until 2004 when he did his research on the Qiblas were all facing not Mecca where they should have been facing if the traditions were correct. That should have been facing Mecca. None of them are facing Mecca. They're all facing the same area where this Nabatean Aramaic is coming from and where all these rock inscriptions are being formed. Now, we see the map there. Let's now look at let's look at it on a timeline, because you need to see this on a timeline. Not just the map, but get that in front of you. There's the map. Look at the Nabatean Aramaic in the north, and look at the Sabaic script in the south. The Islamic traditions. So we're talking about Ibn Hisham, we're talking about Al-Waqidi, we're talking about Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Al-Tabari. These guys that we've been talking about for so long, they're the ones that tell us it all happens in Mecca, Medina. Take a look and see what Ilka Lindstedt, who's probably about the world authority on the rock inscriptions. He looked at 100 rock inscriptions that he dated from 640 to 740. So that's the time period we're looking for. We want to look at this period because 640, it's immediately after Muhammad's death, all the way up to 740. That's immediately before the Abbasids come into power.
That's right.
And I want to bring that in there because that's so important, because that would be the beginning of Islam. This would be, these inscriptions should have reference after reference to something Quranic, because this is the time period that the Umayyads really come into power, and the rightly guided caliphs. Rightly guided caliphs start with Muhammad in 624, but include Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali up until 661, and then the Umayyads come into power from 661 all the way up until 749. So these inscriptions are all during that period, mostly the Umayyad period, and the rightly guided caliphs. So what does he find? Well, he looks at them, and he notices this. He says, prior to 690, look at there. Prior to 690, there is no evidence in these inscriptions, these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of inscriptions, no evidence of anything Islamic at all. Well, where have we heard that before?
Yeah.
With the coins.
That's right.
The same thing we find with the coins, you're finding on the rock inscriptions. Exact same thing. Nothing about Muhammad, nothing about Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, or Ali, nothing about people called Muslims, nothing about a religion called Islam, nothing about a city called Mecca, and nothing that is Quranic. And yet these inscriptions are from that area and from that time period. So he goes on and he says that except for some formula from pre-690, and these formula are not Islamic formula. These are not the formula that we see today. These are pre-Islamic formula. That's all you find from 690 on. Look at that green line. I'm going to keep that green line right there at 690, okay? I'm going to keep that green line right there. From 690 to 710, this prophet's name is introduced. Well, we know that on the inscriptions. That's also introduced on the Dome of the Rock in 691.
That's right.
It's also joined on the coins in 692. It's also introduced on the Caliphate Protocols in 691. So the exact same time period we see on the coins and the and also on the Dome of the Rock and on the Caliphate Protocols, it's also that prophet, that name. If it is prophet, we're still. I'm still on the fence on that one. I don't think that is the Prophet Muhammad. I think it is actually aggrandizing Abdul Malik. I think he's saying himself that he's referring to the Blessed One of God. But that begins to appear from 690 up to 710. Then from 710 to 720, you see these Muslim rites begin to appear. The pilgrimage starts to appear. Wait a minute, I thought they were doing a pilgrimage at the time of Muhammad. No, it only begins after 710 on these inscriptions. And it talks about the prayers. These are the prayers. If you look at the Quran, there's only 3. You start to see these prayers, these same 3 prayers being introduced on the rock inscriptions.
Right.
And also the fast. So these are what we know as the deen of Islam. These are the practices of Islam. But they only begin to appear in from 710 up until 720, that time period, that 10-year period. And then from 720 to 730, the next 10-year period, he says, take a look and all the rock inscriptions start introducing this name Muslim and this name Islam. Now you can see who these people are. So they start from this time, from 720 to 730, they start creating themselves as a people. In contradistinction to whom? In contradistinction to the Christians and the Jews. Mm-hmm. Hold on a minute. This is the time period where the Kiddush then begin to form. Now can you see why the Kiddush start to begin to introduce in 736? Because the inscriptions are showing what is happening here. You now have this discussion going on between the Christians and Jews, and it's all starting there in Kufa and in Iraq and Basra and up in Syria in Damascus. The inscriptions follow the same sequence. Islam is referred to a specific group, always in contradiction to those other cousins who are from Abraham, but they're not like us because we are Ishmaelites, we are Muhajirun, but now we're known as Muslims.
Right.
That's the nomenclature. Look at the rock inscriptions and you can see the sequence how of Islam is beginning to form. So let's look at conclusion. It was only in the 730s. Remember, Muhammad supposedly died in 632.
So almost 100 years later.
This is 100 years later that there is evidence of popular devotion to Muhammad as a prophet. Not what we see on the coins earlier with Abdul Malik, and also on the Dome of the Rock, which is probably looking at himself, and as a messenger, which makes the Islamic traditions incredibly awkward, because the Islamic traditions who don't even begin to appear for another century after this, they don't even begin to appear to 833 and 870. They say that this all began with Muhammad, not according to the inscriptions, not according to the coins. This all happens much, much later. So there is 100-year silence prior to this that indicates that Islam did not exist as a distinct religion until long after the time of Muhammad, which casts doubt on whether he had any part in starting Islam.
Interesting. So what do we cover after this?
What we're going to do is going to look at a few more, not as important as the coins and the rock inscriptions. Now, we have not really done an awful lot with the rock inscriptions or the coins. We've just quickly skirted them because we need to get him under time. What I'd like to do now is look at some other problems that exist. And then after that, we're going to look at some of the claims that Muslims can make concerning what they say are proofs of Muhammad. We're going to debunk every one of them.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for doing that, brother. And I, of course, can't wait until next time. And thank you, everyone, for watching us. And hopefully, you are considering, of course, to share these videos on your own channels, with your own friends, on your own pages, or any other means, because we want the knowledge to be spread. You can, of course, recommend people to come to Founder Films, come to Sierra International. That's where you will find these videos housed. interact with us, send us comments, and we'll do everything possible in our capacity and ability to respond back to you and your questions. In fact, even if you have any recommended topics related to this, run them by us. You never know. We may be able to accommodate some of those by way of doing video series on that, or individual videos as well, or maybe just Q&A to respond to some of these issues. In fact, I'm recommending we start collecting some of these questions and do maybe just video series on responding to these issues as well. Thank you as always, brother. Thank you, everyone. Until we meet again, have a blessed day.